Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS here with a review of Mandalorian Season 3. There has been so much discussion about this show and this season in particular, so much controversy months ago. But I'm just fashionably getting there as, like the Doctor, showing up after all the stuff has happened. And now I'm going to give my thoughts and my afterthought. I think I have a unique take on it, something I don't go really into here, but I am a minister. And so I'm definitely going to bring, some Christian point of view. Of course, part of that is kind of understanding a little bit of Jewish point of view, which I know these writers were definitely emphasizing a lot in this season. But there's a lot of controversy. And so I kind of wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I may have to kick this fan on. It's not too bad right now, but it may get unbearably hot for as long as this video might be. Okay, first off, I want to just kind of talk about the Mandoverse and some of the things that are going on that I think happened with this season. We had the Book of Boba Fett. That was something that we all kind of went, why? It really didn't seem like it fit the narrative of what was going on in Mando. Like, it really did something completely different with Boba Fett than what was shown of him in Mando Season 2. And then 2 episodes were dedicated to the Mandalorian. And just a lot of confusion. Now, some of that going on is that there's been a lot of reported drama at Lucasfilm. Now, I take every bit of it with a grain of salt. How much of that is real and how much is that just them going off and on about stuff, I don't know. But just some of this that seems somewhat plausible. You look at something like the idea that when Grogu went away with Luke, there's the idea that they said Luke's not going to be in the show. Now, some people say that's because of malice. There's definitely been statements that kind of think that, but I also think it might be, to some extent, just how much it costs to do Luke. Because the de-aging and stuff like that, that's expensive. But with that said, maybe the idea originally, from what it sounds like, is originally you were going to see some time period where Grogu was training with Luke and Mandalorian was doing his missions. On top of that, they had a show for Gina Carano, Rangers of the New Republic, which they canned. I get why they didn't recast Gina Carano. I don't agree with her firing. I don't think the tweet that she gave out or the statements that she has made is anything controversial enough to fire over. I get it. She wasn't willing to publicly apologize as other actors who have, but they do much more controversial tweets, also referring to stuff like Nazis and stuff like that get you in trouble. It just seems like that. But I get why they didn't want to recast her, because if they recast her, fans who are already upset over her being fired would have been really upset over a recast. On the other hand, I don't know why Rangers of the New Republic didn't just come out with a different character. Grief Karga, put one of these other characters in there. Harrison Dula, you could have just created a brand new character for that and fulfilled that role. But apparently, that show got shelved. A lot of that, I think, is the fact that they announced it ahead of time and set up that it was Gina's show. So then they were afraid of backlash of releasing the show without her. But essentially, it seems like we're going to be getting the Mandalorian Season 4 is going to be Din doing the role of Cara Dune, which is kind of interesting. And we had a little bit of that. of that plot being put into this season, which meant a little of what was probably the plot of this season was put into the Book of Boba Fett. And they fast forwarded track of the returning of Grogu to Din. Not that Grogu wouldn't have been part of the thing, because he would have been there training. There would still been the Grogu merch, but he would have been off with Luke. And so we've now had it told in interviews that there was a tide jump of about 2 to 3 years in there. And Vegas, I think he trained with Luke for 2 years and then spent a year with Mando before the events of this season. If I'm understanding the timeline right, I may not be, but that's just kind of what I gathered. Now, all that together, it just kind of brings in a lot of mismatch of what's going on. Then you had COVID was also an effect. I wouldn't say COVID was really an effect on this season. However, what a lot of people don't realize is that COVID is still affects Hollywood. Even though most of us have gone back to our lives, like sets are still having mandatory testings and all this kind of stuff, expenses and things to production, still have a lot of rules, especially, this doesn't really affect Lucasfilm, but like for a lot of the shows shot in Canada, they've got extreme rules going on there now. So it could affect this a little bit, but by and large, that is not an excuse for season 3. It definitely was for Book of Boba Fett, maybe Kenobi. There was definitely some cause you could say there, but this is far out, and you definitely won't be able to say it was for Ahsoka. So, the further we get out, especially after you saw what they were able to do with, although this I believe was shot in the UK with Andor, and there's been a lot of, I think they did some things wrong, and I'll talk about it a little bit, but I do think that this season is getting looked at a lot more critical for a couple of reasons. One, Book of Boba Fett shook the faith in the Filoni Favreau team, the Mando team. And then you had another member of that team, one of the directors, go on into Kenobi. And then in turn you had Andor, which, while some fans, myself included, didn't like it because it didn't feel Star Wars enough. It was quality, but it was slow, it did not satisfy at all the Star Wars itch I had. And, but it was a lot more of a serious tone. It took itself a lot more seriously, a lot less camp. And because of that, people who really resonated with weren't going to be happy with even what I would call a perfect, excellent season of Mandalorian. They had a critical eye that they were holding it to that. And so anything less than what Mandalorian had been giving would really get panned. So I do think that this season had a lot going against it going in. Now, let's get into the show itself. We saw in Book of Boba Fett that the Mandalorian, he had been, he'd gone, saw the armor, and he basically did a form of confession there. He came in, she asked him questions. Now, what's interesting is that this was because he had the dark. It's like, why did she randomly ask him these questions? Because he had received the Darksaber, and she knew the significance of the Darksaber. And one of those things that when you, anytime when somebody in a religious organization, they take an oath or receive an assignment, a lot of times one of the things that will be done is that they will ask questions to make sure that they are living in accordance with that religion's decrees. Reason for that is, before they give that, they want to make sure you don't have skeletons in your closet, that you're remaining faithful, not just in outward appearance, but in truth. And so that is a time when those who are about to bestow something upon you ask, are you living, like, for instance, are you living in line with Bible standards? Is there any reason why you shouldn't receive disappointment, giving an opportunity for the one to come forward and say, well, no, I really need to work on this. I'm struggling in this, and get spiritual help if they need it, but not be there. So when she's asking him that in the book of Boba Fett, she's basically saying, are you ready, a good standing Mando, to basically lead the clan? You know, because at that point, she is basically like their equivalent of a religious leader. But if he's going to take on the Darksaber and do that, he would become the clan leader. And, you know, he answers the question truthfully that, you know, no. So he does not display apostates. He displays someone who has succumbed to sin, so to speak, but not necessarily someone who is an apostate. I like the definition they gave here in the dictionary. An apostate is someone who has totally abandoned or rejected their religion. It can also be used in a slightly more general way to refer to someone who has totally abandoned or rejected their principles, cause, party, or other organization. The word typically applies that before the rejection one had strong connection or involvement. The act of such abandoning or rejecting is called apostasy. Both apostasy and apostates are usually used in a way that is critical, such as abandonment, or at least implies that others who remain in the religion or cause are critical of the departure. So that takes us into the first episode, the apostate. And a lot of people were thinking that is referring to Din. However, I didn't think that at all. Because from my perspective, Din is not an apostate. He is someone who slipped, he messed up, he didn't follow the rules, and he has been excommunicated. But he is not out there trying to convince the others to stop serving as Mandalorians, and he is not out there trying to continue taking off his helmet. No, he's on a path for redemption. That is not what an apostate is. An apostate is someone who had strong faith, rejects that faith, and basically does a 180. Specifically tries to live not in accord with their faith, and at times even tries to convince others to join them in that opinion. I would say in this episode, that is Bo-Katan. She is the one who once, you know, Mandalore was at a time of complete peace and pacifism when the whole Clone Wars was going on, and she wanted them to become a warrior race again because she was involved in these more traditional Mandalorian ways. She wanted to bring that out, and that fanaticism about her faith is what her led her to do that. And then when that blew up in her faith, when what we see with Moff Gideon and everything in this season happens, she becomes apostate. She now almost has a mocking nature towards what her beliefs were. She really thinks it's all a bunch of nonsense because she followed the code and she failed miserably. In fact, the Darksaber, something that she revered before, now she's like, it's just this symbol, you put it there, you wave it around, and all these people who eat it up are going to follow you blindly, whether you're a good leader or not. Because now she doesn't feel like she was a good leader. She didn't feel she earned it. She didn't feel that. So, but we see this open up. And what I find interesting is we correspond this with young Ragnar being baptized. And as Mando's coming in, he's looking at this young one. They save him, and they're doing the ceremony, and he watches on. And this is, of course, after the big action scene, but he watches on. There's almost a reflection you can see in it. And I love this about the buckets, the helmets. They can show so much emotion without actually showing a face. But there's almost a reflecting there. Maybe upon his own original baptism. And, it shows that, they do establish in the show that they have to be of age. They can't they're not baptizing babies as Mandalorians, but they're actually baptizing ones who can make an oath. But they are still very young, and so he may be looking at that kid, and he may be thinking, does that kid really know what he's agreeing to? Did I really know what I was agreeing to? I made that commitment myself, and I didn't live up to it. Look at all these ones, this established thing, and I failed. And so all of that can be reflecting. And so when you have the blank state of his face, you can sit there and you're getting the imprint. So a lot of people thought that this was just a wasted rehash, which was funny because other people leading up to it were complaining that nobody would know why Grogu was back and why they weren't. But they kind of rehashed and reintroduced that here. But I felt like they did it in a meaningful way. Because when somebody is excommunicated from the congregation, it is done with the purpose of bringing them back. In Christian Judean faith, that is. This is typically something that is done. The principle for that was at 1 Corinthians 5, 9 through 13. Even if you go before it, there's a situation where it's a father and a son, and one is sleeping with the other one's wife, and it just was something really shocking. And yet he was somebody who was kind of a prominence, and everyone in the congregation just wasn't willing to do anything about it. And yet people who weren't Christians were shocked. This was something shocking, as they put it there in the scriptures, to the nations. And so Paul says, you shouldn't even be eating with such a person. We don't judge those on the outside, but those of you, the shepherds, you need to keep the congregation clean. However, in 2 Corinthians, this person has repented, come back, and then they get instruction that they need to let the person back in to forgive them because they have made changes and adjustments and they have stopped their wrongful course. So the purpose of this is to correct the wrong. Now, how do you establish that? Well, typically there is a period of showing repentance and working at redemption. And that's what we see the Mandalorian doing. And that's why I really appreciate this. Everyone's like, why does he go back and ask the armor again? Didn't she already tell him all this? Yes, but he has been on the quest to find out if he can go back to Mandalore. He found these texts that shows that people have gone down to the planet. It is possible to get there because they're under the belief that, man, if you try to fly down to the planet's surface, it's just toxic, radioactive. Your ship's just going to be destroyed going in the atmosphere. But obviously, some looters, pirates, whatever, have smuggled onto the planet, taken artifacts off, and he's gotten one of those. And so he comes to the armor and says, look, I've been on the path to redemption, and it's no longer something that's possible. I'm making progress. Here is my progress report. And so she reaffirms. She asks him the questions. Did you do this? Did you do that? Helping him to remind him, like, these are the steps that you need to take. And this is what a minister would do with somebody who has been excommunicated that desires to come back in to the congregation, is that there would want to be contact, time period, and repeated visits with the minister, reaffirming what they're doing to make their steps to come back. So this is very much religiously accurate. This is really interesting how they're showing this with the Mandalorian. So I absolutely love this. Now, of course, I also love dinosaurs, and I love monster movies. Like, I'm a big Godzilla, Mothra, Gamera, King Kong, like all of that stuff. So, when the giant croc turtle lizard thing comes up out of the water and tries to eat Ragnar and comes in and so everyone's like, oh, how can they be so mad at him after he just saved his life? Now, I knew ones who are excommunicated from the congregation and there'll be a natural disaster. You still reach out to them and say, do you need help? And a lot of times they step up to the plate and go, do other people need help? And they'll come out and they'll do that. So this is an interesting thing how this all comes apart. So I don't think that this is out of character. And I also like that, he's not socializing with the group. He is socializing with the religious leader, which is what somebody who's excommunicated would do. Now, we see from there that now he's going to go travel. And where do we go from there? But he goes and visits Karga on Navarro. And there he's given another path. Karga is tempting him. Karga kind of represents the worldly temptation to go and have the secular life. He's like, hey, you've gotten rejected from them, but I've got work for you here. You could have a good life here. Forget being a Mandalorian. You could be the marshal. And you'd have a nice homestead. You'd have a good life. Forget your faith. Just come do this and blessings will come to you. That's the allure of the world. It really, really plays into it very well. But he says, no, I need an IG-11. Now, Din doesn't trust droids, and he needs a droid. And so he's trying to resurrect something that he's lost. And this is also an indication of somebody who's lost in the faith. Because any logical person knows that whatever they bring out, that's not going to be the IG-11 they lost. They need a new computer brain. He's rebuilt. He has to be completely reprogrammed. You could literally do that to any droid. Why specifically this one? Well, that's because this droid, he's trying to hold on to stuff that he's lost. He's at a point where his faith is crushed. And so trying to bring IG-11 back is him just trying to piece stuff back together. But this is something unnatural, something that he's trying to hang on to, that he really needs to learn to let go. And he does learn that. He gets past that. And this is part of his growing and healing on his path to redemption. So I like that. Then he deals with the pirates. So the pirates come in, and this is, once again, giving him an opportunity there, trying to pressure him into the act of being a marshal. Now it is look, if you're a marshal, you are saving people. There is good you can do here. You don't have to be a Mandalorian. Once again, that pressure. Of course, I love the thing after he leaves the planet. The never trust a pirate. Oh, what an amazing space battle. This episode just brings it all. Then he goes to visit Bo-Katan. Now, the joke is, she does nothing but sit on this throne in this big empty castle being waited on by a droid. She's just waiting for people to walk up and annoy her. But I kind of assume that she's doing other stuff, but anytime, Bo comes, that Din comes, she, goes and sits on the throne to wait for him. That's just kind of my personal headcanon. But she reveals that after she lost the Darksaber, her clan lost faith in her. And this is when she's laying it on thick with what I refer to as the apostate thinking. So now Din, he's on a path to redemption, and he's got this fellow person who's out. And he goes to them and he's like, help me on the quest. We both can be reading, kind of attitude. And she's like, you're putting faith in that? It's silly. Go get the Darksaber and wave it around, and they'll follow you, and you'll have a new Mando clan, because that's all that matters to them. It's not real. It's just all a bunch of hubbalub. Why are you putting any faith in that? So after this, he leaves, kind of dejected. He's now taking in. So we see all of these different things facing him. And this very much to me represents the struggle of someone going through this difficulty with that. And so that kind of that brings us up there to there. And then what I'm going to do, because I don't want these to become too long, I'm going to keep these down about a half hour, probably less, doing a couple episodes at a time, but I did the introduction on this one. So let's go ahead, cut the video here, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the next episode, the Minds of Mandalore and the Convert. So episodes 18 and 19 in the next video. But this is kind of going to be a series. I'm going to go through this, and then I'm going to go through Picard Season 3, because I think both of these shows deserve to be talked about for different reasons. And if you're wondering where I'm going to go on Mandalore, if you think I'm just going to sing its praises, or that I have a lot of salt for this season, but I also have reasons why I don't have as much salt as I do for the Book of Boba Fett, and reasons why ultimately I think that they can fix this with Season 4 in a way that I don't have hope with other things that Star Wars has done. But we'll get into that in the next video. With that, hope everybody has a good day, and I'll talk to you in the next video.